In 1956, Mao Zedong gave a speech saying that with China's large population, history, and natural resources, it should surpass the United States by 2006, no later than 2016. Today's China resembles that bold prediction, and a 21st century generation is beginning to blossom. But is Mao's vision of today's China really so great for all of these millions of people? It's hard to know if China's train to the future is worth the ticket to ride. And the first and most blatant thing you notice as a foreigner in the capital, Beijing, is that so many people make their livings on the city streets. This is their story. Beijing and Tianjin are gigantic megacities that, if combined together in population, would equal around 35 million people. And being in a city the size of Beijing can be intimidating to any foreigners. But curiosity and the beauty that lies everywhere within Beijing overrides any kind of fear. Scattered around the city are gigantic parks and ancient tourist attractions, including the Forbidden City, the Temple of Heaven, the 798 Art District, and the Summer Palace, to name a few. But I wasn't focused on the magnificent sights of Beijing. I was focused on the people there, and it was the experiences with the people I met along my adventures at these magnificent sites and around the city that created the memories and stories that had to be shared. Would you help this man? He was just outside of the Forbidden City playing CDs of popular Chinese and English songs, while pretending to be singing on his microphone that isn't plugged in. Our tour guide warned us early on of the many scams that are scattered around the streets of Beijing, and some beggars are actually employed to beg, but that doesn't mean he is. The Good Samaritan rule does not really exist on the streets of Beijing. The streets of Beijing are not gruesome. They kind of smell, but the scenery is beautiful and the people are quick to laugh. Many times, large groups of women come together to dance in public. And their fathers are friendly and hospitable. This man and I became friends after I ran into him at his house after taking pictures of his daughter in the park. We communicated through a phrase book, and I found out that he's a street sweeper, and being with him in his home was an experience that portrays the true warmth and hospitality of the people in Beijing. Being surrounded by these people's humor is contagious, and soon enough you're the one that is quick to laugh at the subtleties of Chinese culture. This man is in a famous Hutong alleyway, wearing what we like to call the Beijing bikini. It's a very popular look throughout the streets of Beijing, especially on hot summer days when the sun is actually shining without smog blocking it. Cigarettes are also very popular in Beijing. The Street people of Beijing have their own unique ways of making money, and they are a symbol of the rise of China's economy. Location is very important for a street vendor, and a lot of the times the most vendors are at popular tourist attractions like the Bird's Nest Stadium in northern Beijing that was built for the 2008 Summer Games. Good product doesn't hurt either. In a rather nice neighborhood in Beijing, there is an outdoor food market that has a giant variety of horribly bad smelling food and some really rambunctious vendors who will yell out crazy things in English just to get foreigners' attention. This man caught my attention when he was pressuring me into purchasing what he's holding right there. Sheep balls. But it's so much harder for a street vendor in Beijing. And everywhere you go, there will be someone soliciting people to buy what they have to offer. Haggling with street people is simply a part of Beijing's culture, and the trick I found out is to always know that no matter how much you get pressure to buy something, the pressure is on the seller. Most of the time you don't need what they have, but they desperately need your money. The place where the most haggling took place on my adventures through Beijing and Tianjin was at the biggest tourist attraction of them all, the Great Wall. At the Great Wall, there were hundreds of different street vendors selling simple toys and trinkets, and it was here, at the Great Wall, where the life of a street person showed brightly. It truly is a magical place, and while being on the wall, you feel like you've accomplished something big in life. But still, my curiosity brought me to the side of the wall, where there was a man in an apricot tree picking the smallest of fruits that came from underneath the largest of walls. In China, the best views are where you wouldn't expect them to be. But everywhere on the Great Wall and in the markets below it, you see street vendors selling random things, getting passed by everyone without selling a single item to anyone. I thought a lot about disappointment while at the Great Wall, and I think this image really depicts the emotions felt by a street vendor who can't seem to get anyone to purchase anything and doesn't feel like soliciting tourists. A lot of vendors have so many things to sell, but no one wants to buy, or at least not enough. It's a real problem for some street people in China to have to go home to their families and explain to them that they didn't sell enough trinkets that day. Disappointment is part of being on the streets of Beijing, and it's hard at times for a lot of these Beijing street vendors to figure out what they're doing wrong. For others, working on the streets is their night job that helps them get by a little bit more securely. And for others who go to the same places on the streets, they are focal points for their local neighborhood because in such a huge city like Beijing, you don't see the same people very often, but you do see the street vendors at their usual spots. You get to know them just as people more than others. Life on the streets of Beijing and Tianjin are not easy by any means, but just as the city itself continues to prosper, so will those who work on its streets, and so street vendors aren't going away anytime soon. So yes, Mao may be correct, and China will most likely someday soon be more powerful than the United States economically, and just as the 20th century was called the American century, the 21st century may very well be called the century of China's rise. But none of these statistics or predictions really mean anything about both countries, because when it comes down to it, at the heart of both the USA and China, there are working class people that don't care about who's number one or which century belongs to whom. They care about what's more important in life. And from my very brief travels through the language barrier and culture shock, I realized that we're all a lot more similar than different. And I feel that realization is relatively unknown in America. Mark Twain once said, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime."